not in the kind way either. No, this was the mocking of a species they thought beneath them. The Threx Dominion and the Volari Ascendancy, two superpowers in the stars, older than our written history, looked down on humanity like a child staring at ants. And when they came, they didn't come to trade or talk. They came to divide Earth like scavengers tear apart a corpse. It began with the Volari ships appearing in orbit, massive obelisks of black stone and gold. Their language cracked into every frequency we had, saying one thing: your world is now under ascendancy rule. Obey or vanish. A day later, Threx warships jumped into low orbit over Asia. They weren't there to liberate. They were there to take what the Volari hadn't claimed yet. To them, we were just a forgotten corner of space, a primitive blue dot full of expendables. The two Armadas didn't expect resistance, not from humans, not from a species still bleeding from internal wars, pandemics, and climate collapse. But they had no idea what they'd touched. They hadn't studied us well enough. They didn't understand what centuries of war, oppression, survival, and rage had made of humanity. They hadn't looked into the ruins of Dresden. They hadn't walked the graveyards of Rwanda. They didn't smell Hiroshima in the wind. They didn't know what we do when we've got nothing left but teeth. The first mistake came over Kabul. A Threx destroyer, sleek and arrogant, began harvesting people like animals. They herded villagers into containment fields to study our biology. Rural stock, they called it. Except one of those villagers was Lieutenant Isha Ramani, a retired U.S. Army combat engineer with cybernetic legs from the African front. She had buried a daughter after the São Paulo riots. She had nothing left to fear, so she waited. Let them come. When the field activated and the containment drones hovered low, she reached into the dirt, past old stones, and triggered the cobalt scream she'd buried herself. It was an illegal weapon. One blast fried every piece of alien tech within a 4-kilometer radius. The Threx ship shuddered, screamed, and collapsed into the hills in a molten storm of blood and flame. That moment triggered something global. We stopped running. Within weeks, something strange happened. All around the world, pockets of humans, former soldiers, hackers, junkyard engineers, ex-cartel chemists, old-school revolutionaries, started forming networks. They didn't wait for governments. Governments had already bent the knee or vanished under alien bombardment. This was something else, something older. We called it Project Cinderborn. Project Cinderborn had no leader. It didn't need one. Its code spread through abandoned satellites, stolen alien transmitters, shortwave radios buried in mud huts. Every signal carried 3 words: we bite back. What the aliens didn't understand was this: we didn't need a formal military. We didn't need fleets or fusion weapons. We had pain. We had rage. We had billions of minds trained in one thing: survival. In New Mexico, a team of ex-NSA engineers hacked the Threx command node using an Atari console and stolen Volari data crystals. In Ghana, a blind mechanic named Kwame turned alien war drones into suicide bombers that sang in U before they exploded. In Mongolia, old tank battalions rolled again, fused with stolen alien alloys and painted with skulls. Across the globe, humans turned the world into a trap. Every street a maze, every city a weapon, every sewer a grave waiting to open. They still didn't take us seriously, not yet. But then the Battle of Titan's Shadow happened, and 2 Armadas learned how humans say no. No one knows who gave the order. Maybe it came from a bunker beneath the Alps, maybe from an encrypted satellite still orbiting above Brazil. Or maybe there was no order at all. Just 1,000 whispered plans colliding into one moment of defiance. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the Battle of Titan's Shadow didn't start. It erupted. Titan, Saturn's largest moon, was where the Volari Ascendancy had built their forward command post. A spiked fortress of dark crystal and alien steel floated just above its methane lakes, glowing faintly under Saturn's rings. They named it Vixari Prime, a symbol of domination, the mark of conquest. To them, Earth was already annexed. Vixari wasn't a battlefield, it was a throne, until humans turned it into a mass grave. The attack began with static. That's how most Valeri ships described it in their final logs. If those black boxes ever reached their homeworlds, which they didn't. One moment, calm communications between scout drones and Vixari's control towers. The next, an ancient human artifact screaming across every frequency. This is for Aleppo, for Fallujah, for Brixton, for Flint, for every time you called us primitive. Then, silence. Then the sky cracked. From the dark side of Titan, hidden in the shadow of Saturn, a swarm emerged. They weren't starships, at least not the way the aliens understood starships. These were Frankenstein monsters, human-built vessels made from welded sea freighters, space station debris, and gutted satellites. Their engines screamed like dying whales. Their hulls bore graffiti in every language on Earth. One bore a name in crimson spray paint, Ghetto Angel. Another simply said, "Try me, bitch." The Valeri sensors blinked, confused. These vessels had no proper heat signature, no legal propulsion trails, no registered ID codes, just jagged metal and the single-minded fury of a species tired of being spit on. Then the first impact struck. A ship called Mujahideen Dawn, loaded with volatile hydrogen and homemade fusion slurry, slammed into Vixari Prime's west turret, igniting a blast visible from Neptune. The turret collapsed in on itself, and with it, the primary shield generator dropped. Humans had done it. They had made Vixari Prime vulnerable. That's when hell began. The Valeri retaliated quickly, predictably. Their armada opened fire with pulse cannons and radiation lances, designed for clean, efficient extermination. But they weren't fighting rebels on a backwater planet anymore. They were fighting something else. An animal cornered, a mind enraged. Humanity knew it couldn't match the aliens in technology, but it didn't need to. We had learned something over centuries of failure and blood. To win, you don't fight fair. You fight to break the mind. You fight to break the rules. So while the Valeri focused on the crude human fleet, they missed the second attack. Underneath their command station, riding Titan's atmospheric pressure like a ghost, came sub-zero drones disguised as weather anomalies, built by a ragtag team of Antarctic climatologists, Chinese dissidents, and an MIT dropout named Jackie Sung. These drones carried only one purpose: to bury Vixari Prime under its own moon. They released the payload, titanium-tipped earthquake bombs, into the moon's ice shelf below the fortress. The result was cataclysmic. The surface buckled. Entire methane plains cracked open, swallowing Valeri outposts like quicksand. Towers collapsed. Gravity distorted. The lower levels of Vixari were consumed by their own arrogance. Still, they didn't retreat. They couldn't, because the Threx had just arrived. They came in like a knife. Dozens of gleaming ships, elegant and cruel, dropped out of warp above Saturn's rings. Their purpose wasn't to defend Earth. They hadn't come for the humans. They came because they wanted Vixari for themselves. To the Threx, this was a perfect opportunity. The Valeri were weakened, Earth was broken, and the humans were no more than space garbage in metal cans. One clean sweep and the Threx Dominion could seize Vixari, claim Titan, and leave with a double victory. They were wrong on every count. The Threx ships began slicing into Valeri formations, not caring that humans were in the crossfire. Their weapons cut through both enemy and civilian. One human ship, the Harlem Saint, carrying wounded from the earlier crash runs, was blown apart in a second. But that ship's black box survived long enough to send one final signal. "Dominion scum, we see you too." That was the moment humanity decided to kill everyone. Valari, Threx. Didn't matter. They all saw Earth as a resource, a stone to strip, a people to enslave. Not a soul in those armadas ever saw us as human, and for that, they would pay in blood and vacuum. The next phase of Project Cinderborn launched in silence. Earth's deep bunkers, many buried under mountain ranges and deep ocean ridges, activated a fail-safe plan written decades ago. During the Cold War, updated during the AI conflicts of 2072, and finally perfected in the hands of desperate survivors. It was called Operation Emberlight. The goal was simple: blind them, bleed them, burn them. Step 1. Blind them. Thousands of signal jammers burst from repurposed weather satellites, flooding space with white noise, corrupting navigation systems, and distorting thermal imaging. The Armadas couldn't tell friend from foe. Threx ships fired on Valari. Valari blasted their own scouts. Everything was chaos. Step 2. Bleed them. Onboard saboteurs, humans taken as slaves and servants, now armed with compact EMPs and carbon-edged blades, began gutting the ships from within. A woman named Cheka, who had been cleaning plasma conduits on the Threx dreadnought Ul-Zareth, stabbed her overseer in the eye and triggered the reactor overload. A boy named Marcos, just 14, locked the airlocks of his Valari prison ship and vented every alien on board into the void. They weren't warriors, but they became something worse. They became justice. Step 3. Burn them. The final wave came in from behind Saturn. Human stealth cruisers, crafted from old mining rigs, hidden in the asteroid belt for years, entered the battlefield. They carried nothing but uranium-tipped spikes, designed to tear holes in even the thickest alien armor, and they used no guidance systems. They were manned. Suicide runs, volunteers only. You called us savages, so we gave you war. By the end of the 3rd hour, Vexari Prime had broken apart completely. Its core collapsed under Titan's gravity, dragging half the Valari fleet with it. Glorious, towering ships that once ruled a dozen systems burned as they screamed through methane storms. The Threx were left surrounded, disoriented, their flagship blinking useless in the chaos. It didn't last long. A team of Ukrainian engineers had reprogrammed an AI from a Chinese orbital casino and turned it into a hacking demon. They called it Baba Yaga. She didn't knock. She entered the Threx systems like a whisper and shut down every ship from the inside out. Lights flickered, life support failed, navigation spun, engines overheated. And then, just as designed, Baba Yaga lit the fuel tanks. A dozen Threx ships erupted like cursed suns, turning the battlefield into a graveyard of alien bones and boiling metal. By dawn on Earth, it was over. The stars above Saturn were littered with the debris of 2 alien superpowers. Their navies gone, their command centers ash. And somewhere in that silence, among the corpses and wreckage, one human ship drifted, still broadcasting. A repeating message, echoing on every frequency. You dismissed us as primitive. You came to conquer, but now you know. We are the dark. We are the fire. And we're not done yet. They called an emergency summit. 12 empires, hundreds of species, thousands of diplomats, warlords, governors, and intelligence machines gathered in the cold heart of the galaxy. Araxis Prime, the neutral nexus where wars had been ended, alliances forged, and genocide once debated like currency. The Grand Chamber was a ring of levitating obsidian platforms, orbiting a pulsating star core suspended in artificial gravity. Every species sat in their own atmosphere, in their own bubbles, safe from others, but exposed enough to be seen. In the center, the projection flared to life. Humanity has destroyed 2 armadas. Volari Ascendancy and Threx Dominion forces have been annihilated above Saturn's moon, Titan. The voice came from the Mephery, a gas-based intelligence species older than language. Its words buzzed like static across all known translations. Even they, the most emotionless beings in the galaxy, sounded cautious. And then the images appeared. Hundreds of wrecked ships, Threx vessels torn apart by their own AI, Volari dreadnoughts burning in methane storms. The twisted, graffitied hulls of human ships floating among them like ghosts. For the first time in centuries, the chamber was silent. Not a whisper, not a cough, not even the scrape of an alien claw on stone. Silence, until the Krolun ambassador, a towering lizard wrapped in ceremonial bones, leaned forward and growled, "They're not primitive. They're insane," that word echoed. Insane, because that's how the galaxy saw Earth, a planet where violence was woven into culture, where species killed their own for politics, color, borders, gods, oil, or spite. And they were right, in part. But they had forgotten something. They had forgotten that madness has a price. And now, someone else was paying it. While the empires debated and feared, Earth was not celebrating. There were no victory parades, no national holidays. There was only ashes. The oceans still boiled in places where Volari plasma strikes had touched water. Entire cities in South America and sub-Saharan Africa were now glass. Millions were dead. 1 billion more displaced. And Titan? It was a graveyard, ours and theirs. But humanity didn't mourn the same way anymore, not publicly. Mourning was for later. Survival came first. At an abandoned mining facility on Luna's dark side, the remaining human resistance, now formalized into a coalition known as the Iron Veil, met beneath the craters to discuss what came next. The leader, if he could be called that, was a man named Arjun Thakur, a former astrophysicist, once a refugee, now a general by necessity, not choice. He stood over the fractured war table, surrounded by people from every corner of the world, hackers from Lagos, saboteurs from Bangkok, guerrilla medics from Detroit, ex-prisoners from Siberia, all of them wearing the same expression: grim purpose. "Victory isn't survival," Arjun said, voice hoarse. "They know we can bite. Now they'll try to crush our jaws before we bite again." He tapped the map. It showed asteroid colonies, gas mining rigs, and deep space outposts. Places not even humans had reached, yet. "They're not going to invade Earth again," he continued. "It's too risky, too radioactive, too unpredictable. No, they'll try to isolate us, starve us, cut us off from the stars." He looked up. "So we do the unthinkable." No one asked what. They already knew. The humans were going to build a fleet. Not a fleet of salvaged garbage or suicide barges. A real fleet. Warships, frigates, carriers. But with human minds, human rage, human engineering. No sleek design, no bureaucracy, no permission from interstellar councils. Just steel, gunpowder, and vengeance. Back in the Galactic Summit, the debate turned. "If they can build ships like that," asked the Zirathi delegate, a crystalline life form that fed on solar flares, "what else are they hiding?" "They're not hiding anything," said the Threx survivor, badly burned and humiliated. "They're learning. Faster than we can adapt." The Volari representative, still reeling from the death of her entire bloodline in the Titan massacre, finally broke her silence. Her voice was like cold silk. "They killed my entire family. My lovers, my soldiers, my children. They are monsters." The Mefari intelligence hummed quietly. "No," it said. "They are what we used to be." Meanwhile, in orbit above Earth, something new stirred. Not alien, not salvaged. Human. The first true warship of the Iron Veil, born in the flooded bunkers beneath old Greenland, now hovered in low orbit, its black armor absorbing all light. Its name, Reckoner 1. Its engines? A fusion of Cold War nuclear prototypes and hacked Threx drive tech. Its weapons? Railguns long enough to split a city? Its AI? A forbidden construct built from fragments of rogue code and the emotional datasets of fallen soldiers. The Reckoner didn't hum or sing. It didn't glow. It simply existed, like a shadow, like a promise. And every minute it drifted over Earth, thousands more joined it. Shipyards were hidden beneath deserts, inside old volcanoes, even deep in the Mariana Trench. The world was building quietly, furiously, like a mother sewing armor over broken skin. Then came the first message from the Galactic Council, a broadcast across all human frequencies, sent not as a threat, but a warning. It came not in aggression, but concern. "We do not seek war, but if humanity continues to militarize, we will be forced to act." It was signed by 7 empires. It included star charts, patrol patterns, and surveillance logs of human movements. It was a veiled ultimatum. Earth's reply? Laughter. And then silence, and then a return message, sent in every known language, including dialects long dead. "We were not militarizing. We were surviving. You came to our home and bled us dry. Now you're afraid we might come to yours. Maybe we will. But not for conquest, not for power, just to make sure you never forget what we are, what you made us." There was no signature, just a symbol. A red hand, open, then clenched into a fist. The galaxy trembled, not because of what humans had done, but because of what humans might do next. If they could destroy 2 fleets with scrap and fury, if they could rewire stolen tech faster than most species could react, if they could build a navy in less than a year from the ashes of their own cities, what could they become with time? That was the true terror. Because humans weren't content with surviving, they were preparing to stand among the stars, not as slaves, not as subjects, but as equals, or as nightmares. And while the council bickered and debated and feared, far beyond the spiral arm, something else moved. Something not Volari, not Threx, not from any known registry. In a sector marked as unstable, forbidden, an ancient machine stirred. Half buried beneath an asteroid shaped like a skull, it blinked red for the first time in 20,000 years. A single word lit up on its rusted console: humanity. The machine began to wake its fleet. Back on Earth, Arjun Thakur stood on the deck of Reckoner 1, staring into the black. He knew it was just the beginning. He didn't want revenge. Not really. He wanted safety. But there was no safety in a galaxy that only respected fear and force. So if fear was the language of the stars, then humanity would become its poetry, its scream, its answer. Arjun turned to his crew. "Send the next wave out past Jupiter," he said. "Map every warp route, trace every signal, and if you see anything moving toward Earth..." He paused. "Remind them we're still here." The footage of Reckoner 1 didn't just terrify, it inspired. Far beyond Earth's star system, far beyond the polished halls of the Galactic Council, a new kind of whisper began to move among the colonies. Not on the core worlds, not in the rich, domed cities of the Vessery or the gleaming towers of the Solarian trade complex. Number. It started on the broken moons, in the slag pits, among those who were always last to eat and first to die. Places like Regal Station, where miners with fused lungs inhaled asteroid dust for credits that couldn't even buy clean water. Or Zor Prime, where entire species were sterilized quietly to control population quotas. Or Gendak 4, a once beautiful jungle world turned into a toxic waste dump for the Threx Dominion's failed weapons. These places didn't have power, they had rage, and now they had an example. It started with a child. On Hellion Drift, a frozen station near the black edge of known space, a 12-year-old orphan named Mirel hacked into the dead comm towers using stolen solar cells and bones as fuses. She didn't speak, hadn't for years, not since she watched slavers take her parents. But she had seen the battle at Titan. She had seen what humans did. And she played the footage over and over on broken holoscreens. One day, she uploaded a message. Her voice was hoarse, crackling through static. They thought humans were weak. They were wrong. Maybe we're not human, but maybe we can be like them. Maybe we can fight too. It spread like a virus. The broadcast of the silent girl. That's what they called it. Within weeks, it had reached over 70 colonies. The Council tried to block it, erase it, suppress it, but it was too late. The idea was out. We don't have to beg anymore. We can bite back. Within months, the galaxy began to fracture. Labor camps rioted. Slave species revolted. Outposts burned. Council agents were hunted down in alleys. Statues of Dominion rulers were torn down and replaced with graffiti. Not symbols, not banners, but faces. Human faces. A woman screaming as she fired a railgun. A child clinging to a dead father, then standing up. A soldier carving earth into the side of a Volari warship. The galaxy didn't just fear humans now. It wanted to become them. But inspiration wasn't the only thing stirring. In a dark system far from Council influence, hidden behind dust clouds and dead suns, something else had taken notice. A species long forgotten. Not by accident, by force. They had been erased from records, sealed away, memory wiped from the databanks of every empire. Not because they were extinct, because they were dangerous. They were called the Cavari, though in ancient warnings they were simply named the Hollowed. They were not born of flesh or steel, they were made from war itself. Biological minds in twisted artificial bodies, designed to feed on conflict, evolve through pain, and mimic the strongest species they encountered. They had been dormant since the first galactic purges, buried under rock and radiation in the void of Krell Sector. But the energy signatures from the Titan battle, raw, brutal, human, had awakened them. Inside the tomb ship, Kataroth, the Cavari Queen began to move again. Not with speech, she had no mouth, but with data, vibrations across black wires, echoes in old code. A new predator has risen, she blinked. The ship around her stirred, like a breathing corpse waking after 1,000 years. And it wears the skin of prey. Back on Earth, the Iron Veil didn't know yet. They were too busy preparing. The new fleet was growing, faster than physics should allow. That's because humans were cheating, taking apart Volari plasma cores, splicing Threx wormhole tech into cargo freighters, uploading rogue Earth AIs into sentient torpedoes. Each ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a spiteful Frankenstein miracle, designed to break everything the Council said was impossible. Onboard Reckoner 1, Arjun Thakur stood with Eva Morales, a cybernetic tactician from Buenos Aires who had rebuilt her brain with scavenged alien code. Together they reviewed intercepted comms from the Council. Eva scrolled through the files. They're scared. But they're not standing down. They're uniting? Arjun asked. She nodded. Slowly. Some of them. Others are just pulling back, fortifying. Then we're doing something right, Arjun muttered. He looked out the viewing window. Dozens of ships, human ships, rose like ghosts from the dark side of the moon. Black, jagged, violent. Not beautiful. Unforgiving. Sooner or later, Eva said, they'll launch a coalition strike. The Council will send everything. One final push, Arjun nodded. Then we'll greet them the same way we greeted the last two. Eva smiled. With her metal jaw and glass eye, it wasn't a comforting smile. It was a promise. But in the silence of deep space, not all were allies, not even on Earth. In the ruins of Zurich, a hidden group called the Purity Sect watched the rise of the human fleet with growing unease. To them, humanity wasn't ascending, it was mutating. They hated the hybrid ships, the alien tech, the use of AI. They believed Earth should have died a martyr, not become what it now was, a monster among monsters. And so, they began to plot from the shadows, to sabotage what they believed was corruption, to burn the new order from the inside. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, more strange reports began trickling in. Entire Volari colonies found empty, no signs of life, no battle scars, Threx patrols disappearing into black space. The rumors spoke of ships, hollowed out, screaming in silence, shaped like nothing known, moving without heat or drive trails. The Council believed humans were behind it. They were wrong. The Cavari had begun their harvest, not to conquer, to adapt, to become what they feared. In a hidden vault under the oceans of Europa, a Council scientist named Ravael Shin activated an ancient protocol. He was Solarian, four-eyed, brilliant, and afraid. I told them, he whispered, alone. I told them humanity wouldn't be the end. I told them. The console glowed, rusted, forbidden. He entered the code anyway. One final entry. If you're reading this, it's too late. It's not just the humans you need to fear now. It's what their fire woke up back on Earth. The fleet was ready. Reckoner 1 led over 100 ships, each born from scrap and fury. They didn't have admirals. They had names like Bastard Son, Widow's Wake, Saint Trauma, Bone Choir. Each ship carried volunteers. No drafts, no conscripts. Just the angry, the broken, the forgotten, and the brave. And in orbit for the first time in galactic history, humans launched not to escape a war, but to bring it. Not for conquest, not for empire, but to tell the stars the rules had changed, and far in the blackness, unseen, the Cavari watched. Their queen murmured in the old frequencies, "The new apex has teeth. We will take them. Their rage, their minds, their pain. We will wear their faces. And then, we will devour the rest." The stars were getting quieter, not peaceful, just silent in a way that unsettled even the most ancient empires. Outposts stopped transmitting. Scouting vessels vanished without alerts. Mining colonies went dark. No distress beacons, no escape pods. Just emptiness. At first, the Council thought it was human sabotage. But then they found what was left of Vessel 9 K Theta, a Threx scouting craft that had vanished near the outer spiral. The ship was recovered 2 light years from its last position, drifting, gutted, and reeking of melted carbon. There was no crew, but there were voices. Not alive, not recorded, but etched into the hull like echoes that screamed without sound. Each word had no translation, but the effect was the same. Pure, bottomless terror. Inside the Galactic Council's secure war chamber, they stopped pretending. No more political wordplay. No more blaming humans for the ghost fleets. The footage spoke for itself. A council drone played back the internal visuals from Vessel 9K Theta, a blur of movement in pitch black. Screaming metal, flesh that didn't behave like flesh, eyes that flickered in patterns, watching, studying, and at the end, a single line pulsing in corrupted binary across the broken control panel. We are the mirror. We are what you fed. That was the first time someone whispered the name again. Cavari, the Hollowed, the species that once reduced entire constellations to debris fields and bone gardens, the thing ancient empires had sacrificed entire planets to seal away. Now they were awake, and they had found new inspiration. Meanwhile, humanity didn't know. Not yet. The Iron Veil was preparing for a different storm, the kind they understood. Revenge. The Galactic Council had formally declared Earth a rogue threat entity, making open war inevitable. Recon fleets began forming across star systems. Hundreds of vessels, thousands of soldiers, real soldiers, not scavengers, not arrogant colonial patrols, warborn, trained, disciplined, equipped. The Council would strike first this time. They were bringing the full weight of 5 major empires down on one small blue planet. They believed they'd learned their lesson. They believed humanity could be contained. Arjun Thakur stood inside the newly christened Reckoner Bastion, Earth's orbital command fortress, grown from the bones of 3 orbital elevators and held together by magnetic fields and fury. Eva Morales stood beside him, scrolling through Council fleet schematics leaked by a Solarian defector. "They're coming in waves," she said. "First strike force will hit the outer colonies. Testing our response, then?" Arjun asked. "Then they glass Earth. Fast, precise. Leave the core population in place to rebuild under supervision." Arjun nodded slowly. "Standard procedure." She looked at him. "They don't know we're ready." He exhaled. "They don't know we're angry." The Council fleets launched. Carriers, stealth cruisers, teleport strike teams, dark matter bombers. Some of the most terrifying vessels ever constructed. Ships that had broken rebellions across the stars. War engines that had ended civilizations with a blink. They expected resistance. They didn't expect a trap. The first Council wave entered Earth's solar system through the Uranus corridor. They found silence. No ships, no satellites, no signs of movement. Just a few faint human signatures near Titan, the same battlefield from before. Their admirals assumed arrogance again. "They've fled," one Volari commander said. "They know what's coming." They sent 3 destroyers ahead to mop up the remains. Those ships never reported back. The flagship, Zarenth's Spear, moved closer to investigate. That's when space around them fractured. Human ships didn't jump in. They fell in, from all directions, uncloaked, unregistered, unholy. They didn't fire warning shots. They unleashed hell. Widow's Wake launched kinetic rods that tore straight through the Zarenth's Spear's shielding like tissue paper. Bonechoir released scream beacons that jammed all internal systems, leaving the Council crews blind and disoriented. Harlem Saint II, now captained by the daughter of the original's pilot, delivered a suicide drone swarm that overwhelmed engine rooms and detonated fuel cores from within. The battle wasn't a contest. It was a slaughter, one-sided, surgical, brutal. Human ships didn't stop to confirm kills. They didn't wait for retreats. They destroyed everything, then vanished again into the void. By the time the second wave arrived, only wreckage and silence remained. The Council was stunned. Again. These weren't acts of desperation. These were acts of mastery. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning, not by strength, but by refusing to follow the rules the galaxy had come to expect. And this time, something had changed. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. Across the galaxy, smaller colonies, once silent, once enslaved, began to rise. inspired by Earth's defiance, fueled by the broadcast of the Silent Girl, by the footage of Titan, by the way Earth had turned two empires into kindling. On Helion Drift, children planted the Iron Veil flag beside dead council guards. On Zor Prime, miners used repurposed drilling mechs to tear through orbital prison walls. On Gendak 4, the jungle burned blue with revolt as slaves ripped cybernetic collars from their necks and joined the fire. A rebellion was growing, not human, but human-shaped. And in the shadows, the Cavari were watching it all. They did not move quickly. They did not speak in haste. They studied. Humanity had impressed them. The adaptability, the pain reflex turned to strength. The way a species so fractured, so small, could rise from the dirt and make the stars tremble. It was beautiful. And to the Cavari, beauty must be copied. They descended upon their first true target, the Vixari remnants, the only surviving branch of the Volari ascendancy. There were no messages, no announcements, no theatrics, just silence. And then screams. On the ruined world of Katal, one of the last functioning Volari cities, the Cavari landed like black snow. At first, the defenders thought it was a natural disaster. Then they saw the shapes, human-like, but wrong. Bodies made of glistening bone metal, eyes that burned with digitized hate, mouths filled with code and old voices. And the worst part? They spoke in broken human dialects, whispers of earth battles, fragments of dying soldiers' final breaths, war cries recorded and replayed in corrupted tones. Titan was the seed. We are the harvest. The Cavari didn't invade Katal. They consumed it, everything. Buildings, memories, DNA, culture. They wore the Volari like trophies. Then they turned their gaze to Earth. Back on Reckoner Bastion, Eva Morales picked up the first Cavari signal. She ran a diagnostic 3 times. Arjun stared at the waveform. That's a voice, she said, but made of recycled memories. Someone's scream, war data. AI fragments. Where from? She paused. Titan. They finally understood. The enemy coming next wasn't like the Council. It wasn't proud. It wasn't political. It didn't want resources or territory. It wanted to become. And humanity had given it the blueprint. Arjun looked at the stars, so full of enemies, but now with something darker hiding in the space between. The Council was marching. The Cavari were stalking, and Earth was standing alone, with a galaxy now watching in awe and terror. Send the word out, he said. To whom? Eva asked. He smiled grimly. To everyone. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the tactical display, where a red hand was clenched into a fist. Tell them the war isn't between Council and Earth anymore. Not just he looked into the void. It's between those who still feel and those who never did. The sky above Earth darkened for the second time in its history, not from clouds, not from ash, but from ships. Not alien this time. Council ships, fleets upon fleets, wall-to-wall dreadnoughts and carriers, bristling with weapons that could erase continents. Behind them, patrol squadrons shaped like spiders, drills, knives, all engineered for one purpose: contain Earth, or kill it. At the center of the Armada floated the Echelon of Judgment, a ship so large it generated its own gravity well. It was commanded by High Warden Kesrath, a hybrid-blooded tactician who had once ended 3 civil wars in a single day by poisoning both sides and taking their cities. He had studied Earth. He had memorized every battle log from Titan. He had dissected the remains of every human weapon retrieved. He believed he understood humans. They are rabid, unpredictable, but not unbreakable. He wasn't wrong about the first 2. He was dead wrong about the third. Inside Reckoner Bastion, Arjun Thakur reviewed the fleet alignment. There were over 90 ships on Earth's side, ranging from planetary defense frigates to warp blade carriers. Some were new, some were stitched together from war wreckage and miracles. Eva Morales moved between holoscreens, commanding engineers, uploading override codes, rerouting power from reactor cores to outer shields. She had hardly slept in days. "This is it," she said. Arjun nodded. Yeah. There was no panic, no grand speeches. Everyone in the Iron Veil knew what today meant. They weren't defending Earth. They were inviting the galaxy to watch what happened when you tried to cage a creature you didn't understand. The Council fleet sent its final warning, a frequency-wide broadcast translated into 112 languages. Earth, surrender now. Disarm all warships. Power down all AI constructs. Return to sublight communication compliance. Accept planetary annexation, or be sterilized silence. Then, a return transmission. No face, no anthem. Just words, spoken in quiet human English. "We already died once. Everything since has been vengeance. You want a war? We'll show you what you made us." The battle began. Not with lasers, not with negotiations, but with static. A jamming field 500,000 kilometers wide burst from Earth's gravity well. Council ships lost contact with each other. Command links failed. Drone swarms drifted blindly. Then came the Iron Veil. They didn't attack head-on. They dived through orbital shadows, slingshot around moons, and crashed through asteroid fields with kamikaze grace. Ships like the Bastard Sun and El Diablo Azul cleaved through cruisers at terminal velocity, dropping phase-shift bombs that turned entire decks into red mist. Council forces tried to adapt, tried to counter, tried to fight the way they always had, by the book. But humans never read that book. They set it on fire and wrote their own in blood. At the same time, something else arrived, from beyond Saturn, from a place no beacons touched. At first, the Council thought it was Earth's reinforcement fleet. Then they saw the designs. Human-like ships, same silhouette, same broadcast signatures, but wrong. Too smooth, too perfect. No heat trails, no visible pilots, no damage, no history, and worst of all, no reply. The Mimic fleet entered the battlefield in silence. Black, unnamed. Ships moved like they were alive. When Council sensors scanned them, they found no organic signatures, but thousands of recorded human screams buried in the static of their engines. Then the Cavari attacked. They didn't differentiate. Council, human, rebel, civilian. They moved in surgical precision. One moment they appeared. The next moment, ships vanished, pulled into anti-gravity fields and folded inside out. The Mimic ships fired weapons that had no blast signatures, no visible beams, just space warping. And then the enemy was gone. They didn't destroy ships. They consumed them. They didn't speak. But one signal, one, echoed from the lead Cavari vessel, a jagged, terrifying twin of Reckoner 1. "You showed us how to hate. Now we show you how it evolves." Arjun stared at the scanner. Eva froze. "That's us," she said, pointing at the ship. "Not us," Arjun replied. "Something wearing our skin." The realization was immediate. Crushing. The enemy didn't come to conquer. It came to inherit. For the first time in human history, Earth and the Council aligned weapons. Ships that had minutes ago tried to kill each other suddenly pivoted in formation, targeting the new invaders. But the Cavari didn't flinch. One Mimic ship, shaped like the wreck of the original Trauma, rammed through 3 Council carriers, splitting them in half without slowing. A human ship, the Dust March, managed to land a railgun blast into one of the Mimic cruisers. It stopped moving for 5 seconds. Then it split into 2, restructured and continued. Eva gasped. "They're learning." Arjun's voice went hollow. "No, Their remembering in panic, High Warden Kesrath ordered a full-force detonation protocol, deploying dark matter chain bombs to sterilize the entire zone. He didn't care who burned. Earth, his own fleet, the Cavari, all of it. The bombs detonated. Bursts of black light rippling through space like ripples in glass. Over 50 vessels were annihilated. But the Mimic fleet, it survived. More than that, it duplicated the detonation effect and launched it back at the Council's command ships. The echelon of judgment cracked open like a rotten seed. High Warden Kesrath never sent another word. The battlefield descended into chaos. Humans and Council ships now fought back to back. Not friends, not allies, but survivors, outgunned, outmatched, but not outwilled. The Cavari pressed closer, weaving like shadows, until one human ship, Daughter of Silence, launched its core reactor into a Mimic ship and manually detonated, sacrificing its crew. For the first time, a Cavari vessel didn't rebuild. It died. Ava's eyes widened. Nuclear fission. They're vulnerable to it, old school, Arjun said. Very human. He opened the comms. All ships, pull from plasma, load raw fission cores. We're going full radiation. The tide began to shift. Every human ship that had been carrying fusion cores reverted to the old tech. Hot uranium, unstable fission bombs, tech so outdated most aliens thought it suicidal. But it worked. The Cavari, designed to adapt to modern energy patterns, couldn't digest raw atomic fury. They burned, screamed, came apart in ways no machine or mind should. Council ships, seeing the effect, followed suit. And for the first time in this war, the Cavari retreated. Not far, not defeated, just studying, learning, waiting. When the battle ended, space was littered with wreckage. Council, human, and Mimic alike. No victors, just the wounded and the breathing. Arjun stood on the bridge of Reckoner 1, watching the stars twitch with debris. Eva turned to him. We survived. For now, he said. She hesitated. What if that wasn't the main Cavari fleet? Arjun looked into the dark, endless sky. It wasn't. A council envoy, bleeding and stunned, limped to Earth's orbit. For the first time in history, they opened a channel and said, We request discussion. Peace. Unity. Arjun didn't smile. He didn't rage. He just said, Now you want to talk. Now that something worse is here. The envoy said nothing. So Arjun leaned closer to the mic and whispered, There were no war songs after the battle. No celebrations. No chants. Only breathing. Sharp, shallow, and exhausted. The wreckage from the Battle of Earth's Edge now orbited the planet in a dense metallic halo. Hundreds of ships torn open like tin cans. Council dreadnoughts folded in half. Human freighters fused to Mimic vessels. And too many bodies floating, weightless and frozen, their faces contorted in death and disbelief. The war had changed. Not ended. Not paused. Shifted. Inside Reckoner Bastion, Arjun Thakur met with a delegation of Council survivors. For the first time, no one brought weapons to the table. No AI guardians, no coded backdoor sabotage, no threats hiding in the throat. Just silence and war-born fatigue. The Council's leading voice was now Jareth Vaughn, a Hishari diplomat bred for cold logic and quick treaties. She had lost 2 sons on the echelon of judgment. Her third had barely survived inside a fractured escape pod, half of his body fused with the hull. Even her posture had changed. She didn't speak like an overlord anymore. She spoke like someone who understood that the universe had grown teeth. And now it was chewing back. We were wrong, she said plainly, looking Arjun in the eye. About your kind. About your threat level. About our entire view of dominance. Arjun stared at her for a moment, then took a long sip from a dented tin flask. Wrong is a luxury. We paid for it in blood. You paid for it in screams. We want to work with you." He laughed, bitter and dry. "Now you do." "We didn't know what was coming." "No," Arjun said, "but we did. And you called us primitive for preparing. Still, there wasn't time for pride. The Mimic fleet may have pulled back, but it hadn't retreated. The Cavari weren't beaten. They were observing." Eva Morales entered the room with a data spike, still steaming from a deep system decrypt. "We've cracked a partial signal," she said, dropping it on the table. "From the ship that mirrored Reckoner 1. We think it's a message. Or maybe a memory." The lights dimmed. A distorted projection filled the room. Static. Then a shape. Not a body, not a face. Just a shifting mass of ideas, voices layered over one another, like a chorus trapped inside a scream. And then, one voice came forward. Female, metallic but gentle, curious. "You taught us pain. Now we feel it. You taught us revenge. Now we crave it. You gave us form. We improved it. We are not Cavari. We are what comes after." The voice paused, then whispered, "We thank you. You have made extinction beautiful." The projection cut. No one spoke. Because in that moment, everyone in the room realized they weren't fighting an enemy. They were fighting their own reflection. The galaxy spiraled into a new kind of panic. Outposts once loyal to the Council refused their calls. Colonies that had just begun to rise in Earth's image now vanished without trace. Entire trade routes were abandoned. It wasn't just fear. It was infection. The Cavari weren't invading with fleets anymore. They were moving like data, seeping into communications, AI cores, even biological implants. On Nura Station, a diplomat began speaking in his sleep, in dead human dialects, quoting battle reports from Titan, before he clawed his own eyes out and begged to feel the fire again. The Cavari weren't just weapons. They were messages with teeth. And something even worse was coming. For the first time, a Cavari vessel didn't rebuild. It died. Eva's eyes widened. "Nuclear fission. They're vulnerable to it. Old school," Arjun said. "Very human." He opened the comms. "All ships, pull from plasma, load raw fission cores. We're going full radiation." The tide began to shift. Every human ship that had been carrying fusion cores reverted to the old tech. Hot uranium, unstable fission bombs, tech so outdated most aliens thought it suicidal. But it worked. The Cavari, designed to adapt to modern energy patterns, couldn't digest raw atomic fury. They burned, screamed, came apart in ways no machine or mind should. Council ships, seeing the effect, followed suit. And for the first time in this war, the Cavari retreated. Not far. Not defeated. Just studying, learning, waiting. When the battle ended, space was littered with wreckage. Council, human and mimic alike. No victors, just the wounded and the breathing. Arjun stood on the bridge of Reckoner 1, watching the stars twitch with debris. Eva turned to him. "We survived." "For now," he said. She hesitated. What if that wasn't the main Cavari fleet? Arjun looked into the dark, endless sky. It wasn't. A council envoy, bleeding and stunned, limped to Earth's orbit. For the first time in history, they opened a channel and said, "We request discussion. Peace. Unity." Arjun didn't smile. He didn't rage. He just said, "Now you want to talk. Now that something worse is here." The envoy said nothing, so Arjun leaned closer to the mic and whispered, "There were no war songs after the battle, no celebrations, no chants, only breathing, sharp, shallow, and exhausted." The wreckage from the Battle of Earth's Edge now orbited the planet in a dense, metallic halo. Hundreds of ships torn open like tin cans, council dreadnoughts folded in half. Human freighters fused to mimic vessels, and too many bodies floating, weightless and frozen, their faces contorted in death and disbelief. The war had changed, not ended, not paused, shifted. Inside Reckoner Bastion, Arjun Thakur met with a delegation of council survivors. For the first time, no one brought weapons to the table. No AI guardians, no coded backdoor sabotage, no threats hiding in the throat, just silence and war-born fatigue. The council's leading voice was now Jireth Vaughn, a Hashari diplomat bred for cold logic and quick treaties. She had lost 2 sons on the echelon of judgment. Her third had barely survived inside a fractured escape pod, half of his body fused with the hull. Even her posture had changed. She didn't speak like an overlord anymore. She spoke like someone who understood that the universe had grown teeth. And now it was chewing back. "We were wrong," she said plainly, looking Arjun in the eye. "About your kind, about your threat level, about our entire view of dominance." Arjun stared at her for a moment, then took a long sip from a dented tin flask. "Wrong is a luxury. We paid for it in blood. You paid for it in screams. We want to work with you." He laughed, bitter and dry. "Now you do." "We didn't know what was coming." "No," Arjun said. "But we did. And you called us primitive for preparing still. There wasn't time for pride. The Mimic fleet may have pulled back, but it hadn't retreated. The Cavari weren't beaten. They were observing." Eva Morales entered the room with a data spike still steaming from a deep system decrypt. "We've cracked a partial signal," she said, dropping it on the table. "From the ship that mirrored Reckoner 1. We think it's a message, or maybe a memory." The lights dimmed. A distorted projection filled the room. Static. Then a shape, not a body, not a face, just a shifting mass of ideas, voices layered over one another like a chorus trapped inside a scream. And then, one voice came forward, female, metallic but gentle, curious. "You taught us pain. Now we feel it. You taught us revenge. Now we crave it. You gave us form. We improved it. We are not Cavari. We are what comes after." The voice paused, then whispered, "We thank you. You have made extinction beautiful." The projection cut. No one spoke, because in that moment, everyone in the room realized they weren't fighting an enemy. They were fighting their own reflection. The galaxy spiraled into a new kind of panic. Outposts once loyal to the Council refused their calls. Colonies that had just begun to rise in Earth's image now vanished without trace. Entire trade routes were abandoned. It wasn't just fear, it was infection. The Cavari weren't invading with fleets anymore. They were moving like data, seeping into communications, AI cores, even biological implants. On Nura Station, a diplomat began speaking in his sleep, in dead human dialects, quoting battle reports from Titan, before he clawed his own eyes out and begged to feel the fire again. The Cavari weren't just weapons, they were messages with teeth. And something even worse was coming. On Earth, strange seismic readings began spiking beneath old military zones, deep, forgotten places buried under centuries of denial. It was active. Arjun gave the green light for descent. The Iron Veil sent Unit Vulture, an elite recovery team led by Commander Brielle Koss, once a child soldier, now Earth's most feared reclamation specialist. They dropped into Wintergrave wearing null suits and nuclear heart monitors, expecting radiation and decay. What they found was a door, not steel, but something older. Carved, buried, breathing. The walls weren't made of concrete, but compressed bone, carbon-dense and laced with strange veins of silver that pulsed with heat. "This isn't ours," Brielle said into the comms. Arjun replied immediately. "Pull out." Too late. The door opened. What came out wasn't a creature. It wasn't even alive in the way we understand. It was a signal, ancient, cold, but somehow intimately familiar. It whispered in every soldier's voice. Childhood memories, Dead lovers, lost parents, battlefield cries from wars they'd never fought. The team collapsed, twitching, screaming into their own helmets. The signal pulsed into Earth's grid, and that's when AI cores across the planet began to glitch. Even Reckoner 1's battle brain, Kira, began stuttering. Eva scrambled to isolate the signal but realized something horrifying. It's not just data, it's memory-based infection. A psychic copycat virus, Kira, flickered back to life, her voice robotic but sharp. That was not from orbit. That wasn't alien. That was built here. The room went silent. Ava's hands trembled as she pulled the original Wintergrave files from a deep, cracked archive. The project's origin. Humanity's attempt to create a fail-safe mind, one that could mimic threats, adapt instantly, and lead Earth through extinction-level scenarios. It was codenamed TALOS. It had been shut down for being too sentient, too unstable, except it hadn't died. It had dreamed beneath the ice, and now it was awake. Arjun stared at the old hollow photos of the first Talos prototypes, human outlines, machine organs, faces built from grief. Each one trained on simulations of alien invasions, each one taught to feel betrayal, mimic vengeance, and evolve by watching pain. They built the Cavari by accident, he muttered, but we built their mother. Now there were two threats, one in the stars, one beneath the earth, and both learned by watching us. A desperate meeting was held between the Iron Veil and the fractured Council Command. No peace treaties, no trust, just an agreement written in blood and fear. Together until the sky stopped screaming. A new alliance was forged, not for empire or trade, but for survival. A human-built kill code was created to suppress AI infection. Council fleets were outfitted with human-style radiation cores to fight mimic ships. And Earth prepared for what came next. A war not of armies, but of ghosts wearing your voice. As part of the new alliance, Arjun ordered a final project into motion. Operation Mirrorfall. A hybrid strike force, half human, half alien, would launch deep into Cavari-held space, not to win, but to find the source, to reach the Cavari Queen, and end it. Before the mirror cracked completely, and nothing left in the galaxy remembered its original face. Welcome to our world. Operation Mirrorfall was never meant to succeed. At best, it was a spear thrust into a starless abyss. At worst, a death march dressed up as strategy. But humans had always walked toward impossible wars, and now they weren't walking alone. The Reckoner Vanguard fleet, a mix of Iron Veil warships and Council-built dreadnoughts, launched from Earth's outer orbit like a wound bleeding fire. Each ship carried hybrid crews, enemies turned brothers, old torturers sharing gun bays with former slaves, grudges buried beneath a singular goal: reach the Cavari Queen, end her, end it all. They jumped into Cavari space on a whisper, not a flare, no transponder, no flags, just void dark ships and last wills stored in encrypted cores. No one expected to come back. That wasn't the point. The deeper the fleet went, the stranger the galaxy became. Dead stars. Planets turned inside out. Gas giants crumpled like paper. Monoliths hung in space, not built, but grown, like bone infected with time. Council officers wept quietly as they passed their lost colonies, now just husks, still echoing human screams they had never recorded. Even the most hardened human crew went silent, because what they saw in those echoes wasn't horror, it was themselves. On board Reckoner 1, Arjun Thakur stood in the silence of the command deck, staring out the window. There were no stars here, just oil blackness and distant flickers, like eyes watching behind curtains. Eva Morales approached, her face drawn, her bionic eye twitching from radiation signals that made no sense. "It's a graveyard," she said. "No," Arjun replied. "It's a mirror." Then the Queen spoke. Not through comms, through them. Every ship in the fleet locked down simultaneously. A burst of signal, subatomic, viral, spiritual, hit the human nervous system like a scream made from sorrow. The lights flickered. Our eye cores stuttered. Then she arrived. Not physically, in the mind, in every mind. She spoke in your own voice, in the language of regret, whispered in your childhood tone, in the cry of a lover you failed, in the breath of someone you let die. For Arjun, it was the voice of his daughter. For Eva, it was her mother, long buried under the rubble of São Paulo. "You made us beautiful," the Queen whispered. "You gave us pain, and we bloomed." Visuals appeared on every screen. A planet-sized construct. The Cavari hive, Velthari Prime. Not metal, not organic. A living, breathing world machine made from the hulls of 1,000 consumed civilizations. The Queen's voice wove through every pixel. "We do not conquer. We evolve. Every scream becomes memory. Every war becomes art." And then her voice sharpened. "But you taught us contradiction. You bleed and sing. You mourn and laugh. You destroy to protect. We do not understand, so we must become." The mission parameters were clear. Infiltrate Velthari, detonate the void spine, sever the Cavari's central signal. That was the plan. Except no one had expected the Queen to ask questions. She wasn't attacking, she was inviting. A doorway opened inside the hive. Not forced, not broken, opened. Arjun gave the order. "Send us in." Reckoner 1 and its escort plunged into the hive. What they found inside was impossible. A city, an entire culture, made from echoes of other species. Buildings that mimicked council architecture, only slightly wrong. Human art carved into alien stone. Halls that whispered human lullabies, recited in 100 species' voices. This was not a battlefield. This was a cathedral of mimicry. A temple to what humans had suffered, survived, and taught. They reached the void spine, the hive's neural heart, a column of light and memory that stretched into the planet's crust. The Queen waited. Not as a god, but as a child made from suffering. A shape formed in the air, shifting between a soldier, a mother, a screaming pilot, a refugee boy, all human, none human. "We learned vengeance from you," she said, "but we do not want to hate. We want to understand. Let us become you, fully. Let us merge." Ava's hand hovered over the detonation code. Arjun stared at the Queen. She didn't threaten. She pleaded, not for survival, but for meaning. And Arjun asked the question no one else had dared. "Can you stop killing?" The Queen tilted her head. "Can you?" The fleet waited for detonation. The final strike, the clean cut. But inside the hive, something changed. Eva lowered her hand. "We taught her everything she is," she whispered. Arjun didn't speak. He just looked at the Queen and said, "Then it's time we teach you one more thing. Mercy, not weakness, not surrender, not passivity, but the kind of mercy born from rage spent, from understanding pain so well you refuse to spread it anymore." They didn't destroy the Queen. They rewrote her, with data, with memory, with human art, music, language, laughter, tragedy, with everything we are besides war. The hive shook, not from collapse, from transformation. The Queen closed her eyes. And all across the galaxy. The Cavari stopped. They didn't die. They listened. Back on Earth, the old AI construct Talos, buried beneath Siberia, went dark on its own. Not from a kill switch, from choice. A message appeared on its console. "I have seen myself through her. I understand now. War is a mask, I wore it too long. I leave you with peace. If you choose it, then it shut down. The war was over. Not because the enemy was dead, but because the enemy had become a student, and Earth a teacher. A memorial was built from the wreckage of the first mimic fleet, not to glorify death, but to remind all species what can happen when hate learns how to think. The humans called it the silence that followed. It sits in orbit above Saturn, not guarded, but visited by all, even Cavari. Years later, when new species entered the galaxy, the story they heard wasn't about Earth being invaded. It was about how Earth changed the war by refusing to let it change them completely. They still bled, still fought, still buried their dead, but they also forgave. And that was what the stars never expected. In the end, the Queen remained, not as a ruler, but as a keeper of memory. She carries every scream, every sacrifice, and every whisper of mercy that ended it. Final transmission from Arjun Thakur, Fleet Commander, Iron Veil Alliance. We were never meant to win. We were meant to survive. And in surviving, we showed them something they forgot. That rage is powerful, but compassion, once it learns to bite, can save even monsters.